Welcome to the Insights Unlocked podcast. I'm Nathan Isaacs, Senior Manager for Content Production at UserTesting. And joining us today as host is Louis Granger, UserTesting's Regional Vice President in Australia, New Zealand, and Asia. Welcome to the show, Louis.
Hi, everyone. Good to be here.
And our guest today is Sharbani Dhar. Sharbani is the founder and CEO of dotinfinity, a former design director at Australia Post, and a longtime UX and CX leader influencing customer-centric solutions across agile environments. Welcome to the show, Sharbani.
Thank you so much for having me, Nathan. Glad to be here.
Over to me. Well, hi, Sharbani. Great to see you. We first met when you were in your role as design director at Australia Post, and now it sounds like you're doing amazing things as the founder of dotinfinity. It would be great to start by telling everyone a little bit around your journey in these roles, and then building on that, how that shaped your approach to customer experience. And more recently, you're interested in AI as well.
Sure. Happy to share that. Thank you so much for, giving me this opportunity to talk to your audience. I think, my entire career has been as a designer and a researcher. And over the years, I did realize that design and research are often misinterpreted. And they are considered very transactional and, just to make things look good and to validate whether, this idea is good or not. And I think that was always a constant, I wouldn't say struggle, but a constant education, maybe, and a constant hidden trial where you keep trying to be the entrepreneur in your organization and try to make them understand the value and what design brings to the table. Essentially start to move it from a transactional experience to more of a strategic entity, which can, really inform strategy and really help you shape what your customer problem is and the overall outcome, and eventually that can lead to business outcomes. So I think that's why dotinfinity came about, because after quite a few years at Australia Post, and I really loved that stint over there because I really could work with the end users in an organization which had a great purpose to it. And then I could bring that forward to dotinfinity, where, in this world, I realized over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of noise around AI. And everybody wants to go for this rapid adoption of this new technology, where, you see almost like a manifestation of AI in terms of ChatGPT and all of that, even though it's been there for years. You see people trying out all of these new tools from different areas of productivity, but there's no clarity around which is the best tool suited for the people in your organization and the customers that your organization is trying to service. So that's when I realized that design still has a very important voice, where we really need to bring the conversation back to the human and clear that AI clutter and really bring the focus back onto the problem that we are trying to solve, and then prove the value, the ROI of AI or any other tech implementation by, going back to the problem and then looking at the outcomes out of it.
Yeah, and I really love your point around design, not just being about how something looks and making something look pretty, but it's also about how do we actually deliver quantified outcomes to the business in terms of driving our customers through more of our key flows. And then moving on to your points around AI, that there's so much excitement. I was at a conference last week. AI was in every other word, but a lot of companies are still really struggling to see the true quantified value of it. And from your perspective and your experience, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions around AI that actually holds companies back from using it really well?
Absolutely. I think, so just to share some data with you, there was a recent study done by BCG, and out of all the organizations that are investing in AI-led initiatives, about 63% are specifically investing in AI-led initiatives, which essentially power up innovation. And out of that, unfortunately, only 45% of them have been able to identify return of investment, or rather business impact for all of the investment that they have put in, which is phenomenal because when you look at any AI initiative, it costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of resources. And when you are not getting that right ROI, there has to be something which is going wrong. So When you look at any implementation of AI, there are three broad categories. One is from essentially any new idea or service or any new business model that you're trying to introduce by having an AI initiative. The second is looking at transformation, business transformation, looking at optimization and efficiencies. And the third one is when you're trying to change the behavior of your customers or your employees or staff. So most of the initiatives right now are focused on the transformation piece. And when you talk about misconceptions, I think the problem is that most of the transformation pieces are all tech-led. So everybody's going at it from a technology first perspective, where it's like, okay, this is the kind of efficiency we need. So let's plug in this kind of technology because it will really help us speed up the process. We are slowly forgetting that conversation of, okay, what is the real problem that we're trying to solve? Which is where design and human-centered design comes in, where you go back to what is the core problem that we're trying to solve, what are the outcomes that we are expecting, and then really try to, go about solving it. Because any business transformation in any mid-sized to a large organization takes a minimum of 18 months to 3 years to even 5 years and more. But when you look at technology is changing. Every 6 months we've got something new. And now with AI in the picture, we've got even more rapid changes happening. So when you're going for a tech-first transformation, what is happening is by the time you implement a transformation initiative, the technology that you were planning to implement has already gone obsolete. So you are essentially always playing catch-up as an organization. So you're never really getting that kind of business impact that you could have if you would have probably gone from a problem-focused transformation where you are really looking at problem, you're technology agnostic, and you're continuously checking yourself to see, are we really solving the problem? It's 6 months. Have we successfully solved at least part of the problem? Have we solved this part of the problem, and so on?
Yeah, I'm really well aligned with you in terms of how I see it as well. And it also has a direct correlation, in my view, to company size. Like your scale-ups, your mid-sized companies are fast adopters, and they typically have that problems-first mindset, whereas your big enterprise laggards, they're thinking about the underlying technology and putting a roadmap through that rather than thinking about the actual problem. And it sounds like what you're coming across as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even at the conference I was at last week, there's so much FOMO around leadership of missing out on some form of AI, and everyone's asking everyone, what are you doing? How are you doing it? What platforms are you using, etc. But when leaderships have teams have so many different options around how to adopt AI, what sort of criteria do you recommend they use to evaluate AI's potential impact on their business needs?
So there are quite a few, but I think one of the most important criteria is, as I said, firstly, look at the problem that you're trying to solve and then see how is it tying to your organizational KPIs, the strategic goals of your organization. And what my team did is we built this responsible AI canvas, which is in 3 parts essentially. But the first part is all about this, like how do you really evaluate whether we are ready for an AI transformation or not. So it literally gives a traffic light checklist of whether even AI is the right solution for you or not, because I think that is the first question that you need to ask yourself, that is going the AI way the right solution at all or not? Because if we are looking at simple, data-led initiatives, then yes, it might be a very straightforward green, but there are some instances where you might be dealing with certain data which might be sensitive, or the quality of data might not be that clean, or the right kind of data set, then it might be more of an amber. And then there are certain cases where that's red because you don't have enough data, or the cost-benefit ratio is really not worth it because you will spend a lot of money in going for an AI initiative, but you are not really getting an ROI. So just doing that sanity check, looking at your organizational KPIs, like, what is the true value metric that you are hoping to achieve out of an implementation. And then going to the next step, which is looking at, are you ready as an organization from an infrastructure point of view? When I say infrastructure, it's not just technology, it's also your people. the quality of that you have, and the kind of governance that you have in place for your AI implementation. So there are a lot of factors that you need to consider. So are you ready for that or not? And then the final one is when you go into the execution stage, what is the bare minimum checklist that you need to have in order to have a sustainable AI implementation? Because it takes effort, it takes a lot of manpower as well as resources. Well, have we made it future proof? And have we made it in a way, or are we planning to build it in a way so that we've got all the human checkpoints in place, we've got all the transparency considerations in place, we've considered all of the PII sort of data and all of that, and we are ready as an organization, we are going for it in a very responsible manner.
That's super interesting. And I think we hear a lot about infrastructure, technology, governance, data. We don't hear so much about people when it comes to AI and implementing that in an organization. Are there any things in particular you would look out for outside of, I think you made a really interesting call out around partners and supplementing knowledge. Is there anything else you'd add?
I think, so there is one thing, when you look at people, especially, obviously the AI implementation might require you to hire certain new kind of workforce. For example, if you don't have, say, behavioral scientists or data scientists on your team, those are the key skill sets that you need to have. But also we need to be very mindful of the kind of workforce we already have and how can we augment them. Or what is a little bit of, a basic training that we can provide them so that they can, think about the AI implementation in a more ecosystem sort of manner. And the other thing I feel is really important is not to look at it from a very siloed view that, the organization is only, or rather only the AI team or the data team will build the solution, but rather identify that it is actually an initiative which impacts the entire organization. So, that is how you need to measure, essentially take an accountability of all the people that you need to involve in the process, and eventually the kind of customers that you're solving the problem for as well. And the third most important thing when you look at AI implementation is also the ecosystem. So don't just think about a single problem, but think about the ecosystem that you are trying to solve for, and what are the kind of partnerships that you can build with other organizations. And a very simple example would be, there's an organization in Canada which offers insurance, health insurance. And they obviously had an AI-led solution where, you are giving hyper-personalized insurance recommendations for your customers. But what they started to do is they tied up with a supermarket chain. And this was another partner in the ecosystem which they brought in, and they started to reward healthy buying behaviors of their customers.
Great.
So that's essentially, you're bringing in that ecosystem thinking into your implementation to look at it in a much more holistic and sustainable manner than just, I need a technology to solve my immediate problem.
Sure. No, I love that example in Canada as well. I feel like we need more of those in Australia as we drive adoption of AI. I guess that comes on to my next question. When we think we've spoken a little bit about the internals, right? The governance, the people, the tech, the process, the mindset in organizations. But when it comes to the AI experience we deliver for our customers, what are some of the kind of big design missteps or mistakes that you're seeing brands make?
I think the first one is the most obvious one, which I talked about earlier, is essentially being tech first, not thinking about the customer or the problem that you're trying to solve. So you need to always have that constant focus on the problem and the customer that you're trying to solve for. And always continuing to do that sanity check, that are we still on track? Are we still true to our purpose of solving the problem? Or are we just going too much into the tech implementation phase and just looking at even metrics that are tech heavy instead of problem solving sort of metrics, or rather the success criteria. The second thing which I would say is over relying on automation and not having that room for human errors, human creativity, and human checkpoints. I think that is so important, put in place, not just to keep you safe as an organization and risk-free, but also to ensure that you continue to grow as an organization because AI relies on obvious patterns and obvious behaviors, whereas a human creativity is something which can't be replaced by AI because it's always looking for the not so obvious. It's trying to bring out innovation from looking at not so obvious patterns, not so obvious data, those little tiny bits of insight which you can capture in a conversation which an AI would even fail to notice, and it would probably discard it as irrelevant. Whereas you're like, wait a minute, something amazing that I just heard. So I think that really keeping that human in the process is really important. And then finally, the third design misstep I would say is a bad experience integration, a poor experience integration. So not thinking of things end to end and not looking at your implementation as an end to end experience, and just looking at it as just an immediate stopgap solution, because that would be a huge opportunity lost. You've got a very powerful tool when you look at AI tools, the kind of possibilities that they can give you in terms of hyper-personalization, predictability, and just, the kind of speed and efficiency. If you are not looking at the entire end-to-end experience and looking at it from an ecosystem thinking perspective, you're losing a huge opportunity. In a huge opportunity from the perspective of also the amount of investment that you've made as a business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, Sharbani, let's take a scenario here. So let's say a big organization, they've identified an area where they can gain a lot of efficiency in a customer journey by introducing AI. And I think to your point there around experience integration, there's so many people that touch on a customer journey now, whether that be product teams, design teams, engineering, research, tech, etc. Like, how do you get stakeholder engagement and buy-in to doing these things? And also, what are some of the common pitfalls that you see companies falling into when they're trying to introduce this new tech?
I think when you look at stakeholder buy-in, again, it's all tying back to your overall organizational strategy, right? Who all are the stakeholders that get impacted by a problem that you're trying to solve? And this becomes really clear when you're taking a problem-first approach instead of tech-first approach. Because when you look at a tech-first approach, you forget about the kind of people who might get impacted, which might be outside your immediate business vertical. There might be, many people who might be outside. But when you look at it from a problem perspective, immediately that becomes very clear. So I would say when you want stakeholder buy-in, go at it from a problem perspective and then say, okay, this is the kind of impact that we can get if we solve this problem of yours. So how about we do this together? Because this is going to be beneficial for all of us. And then the second one is, I think, when you look at it, how to avoid it, it's obviously thinking that the AI implementation is only the responsibility of the tech team or the data team, or, the AI team, whichever is the respective team in your organization. If you think that it's only their responsibility, then you're grossly wrong. Because when it comes to AI, it's all about the best integration that you can get out of your system, the kind of data you have. And if different parts of your organization are not talking to each other, not sharing the data, not sharing the insights, then it's not, it's not going to be a fruitful implementation, which will really give you good business impact. And then obviously the most important stakeholder is your end user. Don't forget about that. Continuously bring that into the picture, continuously keep trying to get through to the problem that you're trying to solve for them. That becomes really important.
And one of the most critical things of any initiative, right, Sharbani, is metrics. How do you get buy-in for the metrics that you've aligned to that initiative? And with AI, from what you just said there, there's obviously external customer-facing metrics, but then you've also got the internal, the efficiency, the cost, the governance, etc. What are the kind of typical metrics that you'll see in organizations measure this on?
I think when you look at metrics, the idea is to look at really true value-based metrics, which really bring value to the problem that you're trying to solve. So obviously your revenue is really important, but metrics like efficiency, trust from a brand perspective, from loyalty from a brand perspective, engagement. And when I say engagement, not just customer, but actually employee engagement as well. And then innovation metrics, and of course, risk and regulatory metrics would be very important to consider. But going back to the engagement piece, I would just like to highlight that, because I've often seen that while we try to measure customer loyalty and customer engagement by those stock standard metrics like NPS, PS, I hate NPS.
We could have a whole nother podcast about NPS, Sharbani.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the most eyewash metrics possible, but I think it's really important to see how engaged are your employees in any organization which is looking at, implementation, especially because employee engagement can really impact the eventual metrics in terms of customer engagement as well as business revenue. And we have seen that live when employees are better engaged, they are a lot more efficient, and then they can actually bring about much better business value. So these kind of metrics become super important when you are thinking of any implementation.
Yeah, and the other aspect I always think about is, as you're introducing new technology to your customers, you need a proactive way of actually benchmarking that experience, whether that's going to drive additional revenue or reduce costs. And you spoke about NPS. I'm also not necessarily on the NPS bandwagon, because it's such a lagging indicator, right? It won't tell you why you've lost a customer. And it's post-investment and post-journey. So it's too late. And especially when we're introducing cutting-edge technologies that maybe introduce some, I guess, unknowns into the customer journey, it doesn't help you. So I think you're absolutely right that the way in which you develop it internally, the way in which you proactively measure it, put it in front of customers before it goes live are really critical. Do you have any examples of that out of interest?
Look, I think the best example that I can think of is from my previous organizations. I wouldn't name them, of course, but one of the organizations that I worked in uses NPS as a very valid metric, whereas it's probably the only organization that provides that service. So it's a false metric, because the question that we ask from an NPS perspective is, how likely are you to recommend this service or this organization or this product to, over any other products to your friends and family and all that? Whereas there is nothing else to recommend. So how would you, that's the only choice you have.
Well, if the execs are paid on it, Sharbani, I'm guessing they love it, right?
Exactly. And the worst part is that, so we were capturing that data for this entire journey that the customer takes, where they're going through an onboarding experience, they're going through this education experience, and then eventually they're going through a payment experience. And then we eventually ask the question, and we also ask the question only in the case of a successful payment, because we can only ask that once the journey is completed. So obviously, you're not capturing all the people who have dropped out of the journey. You are not capturing why they would have dropped out, or how. We are not capturing the issues that they had while completing that task as well. You're just asking that question right in the end, where in all likelihood they might have, say, if they have done a purchase experience, especially, they've probably got the product, so they're like, okay, fine, I got it, I'm happy, and my job is done. So it's such a false metric to capture, which really doesn't tell you anything.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm sure we could have a whole podcast series on this. Maybe we'll ask the user testing team to set that up. But going back to AI, we focused a lot on kind of the business level, high level stuff, strategy, how you integrate and embed AI into your culture and for your customer experiences. But if you're an individual working at an organization, there is a plethora of information around there. If they go on YouTube, Google, anywhere, it's overwhelming, right? So where do you think people should start to help get them comfortable with AI and how it can help them in their daily roles?
I think just educating themselves on how their roles can be augmented using AI. So finding different types of things out there in the market really helps. But also some of the basic training, which recently the Australian government has come out with the responsible AI guidelines. And as part of that, there are 3 basic trainings which they have identified, which almost need to be regular, not just for people who are implementing an AI solution, but in general about anybody, any organization which is using AI in their process, which is responsible AI training. Then there's data and governance training. And then finally, and I feel that's the most important one, is diversity and fairness training. Because as I'd mentioned earlier, AI models are based on identifying patterns and, recognizing the most obvious patterns in this huge maze of data. So unless we acknowledge that biases can be made and very obvious biases can be done, we will fail in successful execution, or we'll fail in actually making sure that our AI implementation is fair and without any biases. So ensuring that we have enough diversity of data sets, diversity of just overall perspectives that we are feeding into our data models, it's really important. One of the very obvious examples which I heard of recently, and this is probably hearsay, but was a recruitment-based software, which was just, so many organizations use that right now. A lot of recruitment-based softwares are essentially AI-driven now, especially when it comes to filtering candidates. And because this was a very male-dominated profession, where males of a certain ethnicity and essentially age group are generally selected, the AI actually eliminated any female candidates. It eliminated all the different races and only showed those kind of people as the most eligible candidates for shortlisting. So I think that's such an obvious example of bias creeping into your AI model, or your LLM model. So you have to be very, very careful of things like that. So these 3 trainings are advised by the government as almost like a regular repetitive trainings, which any organization needs to embed in their policy. But I would say just being open-minded overall as an individual. I think being open-minded about different types of technology that's there, which can impact your work or rather your life as well, but also being aware of the kind of diversity that is needed within that task that you're doing, and being very, very aware of the bias that might creep in is really important.
Yeah, I mean, that recruitment example is a great example of why it's so important to develop AI responsibly and test and validate it across your diverse customer groups. And I love that. And I know that's going to align with something you're going to tell us about very shortly. But for me, Sharbani, I've really, really enjoyed the conversation. I think we're behind on the AI curve in Australia, and I'm so happy we have people pioneering the movement in Australia like yourself. So thanks for your time. And for everyone listening, how do they learn a bit more about you and your thought leadership?
Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. We also host a podcast called Cusk and Converse, where we essentially just have technology stories and how some very inspiring technology leaders in Australia are changing the technology landscape over here, with or without AI. And the other thing is we would love to give away a responsible AI canvas for any of the people watching. So I think Nathan will be providing the link to the canvas. But yeah, that's a really good way to be very mindful of the kind of considerations that you need to have when you're thinking of a problem which might have an AI-led solution. So we would love to share that with everybody. There's no charge or anything to it. So feel free to use it and feel free to adopt it, because it's really important that we go about it in a very mindful manner.
Amazing. It's very generous of you. Well, thank you again, Sharbani. Really appreciate your time, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you.